"Mom, please don't leave me." The child's voice cracked through the thunder of a stormy night, trembling with fear, grief, and the sharp sting of abandonment. He clung to his mother's motionless body inside the freezing cold of an old storage shed, holding her hand as if he could pull her back to life. His small frame shook under the weight of dread. Then, the creaking sound of a door opening cut through the silence. A man stood in the doorway, paralyzed in shock, because in that very same corner, in that same suffocating dark, he had once begged for his life too. Claire Matthews had once believed that patience could fix anything. She taught part-time art classes, lived simply, and placed her faith in kindness. For 3 years, she was Mark Wallace's wife. 3 long years of trying to be soft enough, accommodating enough, loving enough to earn a place in a family that never truly welcomed her. But kindness can only carry so much weight before it's crushed. And on that October night in Glendale, everything Claire had ever given in sincerity was shattered by the very people who claimed to be her family. Rain drummed outside like a steady war beat. Inside the Wallace home, comfort and cruelty coexisted. The fireplace crackled. The scent of lavender floated through the air. A golden chandelier swayed gently overhead. Yet in the middle of that domestic illusion stood Claire, soaked to the bone, trembling, the strap of an old canvas bag clenched tightly in her hand. Inside were a few children's clothes, a half-empty baby bottle, and Ava's small, beloved blanket. Her jacket, thin and frayed, offered no defense against the icy wind that crept through the cracked front door. Darlene Wallace sat on the couch like royalty presiding over exile. Legs crossed, pristine white sweater glowing under soft light, a wine glass swirling in her hand. Mark stood behind her, silent. His eyes didn't meet Claire's. Instead, he watched the financial ticker scroll across the television like it held more truth than anything Claire might say. "You can walk out on your own," Darlene said, her voice cool and dismissive. "Or I can call the police." It wasn't a threat. It was a formality. Claire drew in a breath, steadying herself. "The kids are asleep," she murmured. "Even better," Darlene replied without looking up. "Easier to carry." Mark shifted slightly, but said nothing. "Do you really believe I cheated on you?" Claire asked him, eyes searching his face. Silence. Then came his voice, hollow, distant. "I'm not sure those kids are even mine." Claire exhaled a quiet laugh. Not bitter, just the exhausted kind you give when something died long ago. No more words. There was nothing left to salvage. Darlene reached beside her and set a small bag on the table. "There's a few hundred in there," she said. "Enough to start over, if you're smart." Claire took the bag without flinching. She walked upstairs, quiet as snowfall, careful not to wake the children. Ava clutched her one-eared teddy bear in sleep. Eli lay curled on his side, his hand still gripping the edge of Claire's sweater even as he dreamed. She lifted them both gently, wrapped them in blankets, and walked back down the stairs. Darlene had already opened the front door. Cold wind swept in like a verdict. No one stopped her. No one asked her to stay. Claire looked at Mark one last time, not with pleading, not with anger, just the quiet stare of someone who once loved deeply, but now understood that love alone cannot protect. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the children as she stepped out into the storm. The door closed behind her with a soft click that felt louder than a slammed gate. It was final. It was the sound of being severed from what was once called family. Rain struck her neck like needles. She stripped off her coat and wrapped it around her children, leaving her own back exposed to the icy air. Bare feet on slick stone steps, Claire held Ava close while Eli, still asleep, clung to her collar like it was the last tether to safety. She didn't know where to go, only that she couldn't go back. Not now. Not ever. "They won't grow up in a house full of hatred," she vowed under her breath. "If I have to lose everything to keep them safe, then I will." At 9:14 p.m., Claire Matthews was thrown from her home with 2 children, a battered bag, and the last of her trust in human decency. No one called after her. No porch light stayed on. The wind had changed, now pushing against her face with every step, as though the world itself had turned cold. She could barely feel her feet. Each step shot pain up her spine. Still, she walked. Not for herself, but for Ava and Eli. She didn't cry. Crying wouldn't help her legs move. It wouldn't make her arms stronger or the cold any less brutal. Through the bare trees, she saw it. An old shed, battered by time, its roof sagging, its wood blackened with age. A place long forgotten. But to Claire, it was a miracle. She stumbled inside. The smell of old straw and damp wood clung to the air. It was dark, just as dark as the night outside. No light to adjust to. She laid Ava and Eli in the corner on a shallow bed of straw. It was scratchy and clung to their skin. Ava whimpered. Claire had no voice to hush her. All she could do was breathe. Ava, just 3, had always felt things with the weight of someone twice her size. Her face reddened, tiny body trembling. She buried herself in Claire's chest. Mommy, I'm cold, she sobbed, pulling Claire's hand to her chest like an anchor. Claire stroked her daughter's hair, unwrapped her scarf, and with trembling fingers wrapped it tightly around Ava's small frame. I know, baby. Mommy's here. Eli was silent. He had been all along. Even after being carried through the freezing rain, he hadn't made a sound. His wide, dark eyes didn't blink. They just watched, observing, absorbing. His silence wasn't fear, it was knowledge. He knew something was wrong. He knew more than any child should. Behind his ear, a small birthmark shaped like a water droplet, a mark Claire once called his brave drop. She used to say Eli was as quiet and deep as a morning lake, but tonight, that quiet terrified her. When she laid him down, he didn't flinch. He just kept watching, not crying, not sleeping, just waiting. Claire wrapped her arms around them both, gathering their small bodies as close to her chest as possible. To her left, Ava shivered, holding on like her life depended on it. To her right, Eli was still, but he wasn't asleep. He was listening, her shallow breathing, Ava's fading sobs, the storm tapping the tin roof. Claire didn't know if she was trying to warm them or keep herself conscious. Her hand slipped beneath Ava's neck, across Eli's shoulder. He felt thinner than before, colder, but her hands were too numb to be sure. Her back pressed against the wall. Her eyelids dropped. Ava's tiny voice broke through the quiet. Mommy, don't fall asleep. Claire forced a smile, fragile and cracked. I won't, she whispered. But she knew it was a lie. Her consciousness was slipping. Her vision blurred. Her limbs refused to move. Eli knew it too. He sat up, slow and calm. He touched her cheek. Her skin was cold. Her arms had loosened. Her breath was shallow. He looked at her for a long moment, studying her face like he was trying to memorize it. Then, in a voice so soft it could have been mistaken for wind, he whispered, Please don't leave me, Mommy. It wasn't just a plea. It was a surrender. A child's final attempt to hold the world together with 4 words. Outside, the rain eased, but inside the shed, time stood still. Down a muddy path toward the old Grayson farm, a black Range Rover moved slowly, its headlights slicing through rows of pine. In the driver's seat sat Nathaniel Grayson, 45, self-made biotech millionaire, polished, poised, and powerful. But once he was just a boy with no name, no parents, and no place to call home. The only roof he ever knew, briefly, was here, on this land. Taken in by a kind farmer after a brutal storm, that man died when Nathaniel was 19. He left and never returned. Until tonight. He parked near the porch and sat still. Rain dripped from the roof. Mist clung to the valley like memory. The porch light glowed faintly as Maggie Jean, the housekeeper, stepped out. Thin, tough, eyes full of history. "Welcome home, Nate," she said with a soft smile. "Still smells like old hay, still cold as ever." "I don't remember it ever being warm," he replied, his eyes drifting to the back shed. She followed his gaze. "There was a noise earlier," she said. "Thought maybe a cat, but it sounded like a child crying, from the back shed." Nathaniel didn't answer, but she saw the way his fingers tightened around the mug she'd made him, the way his eyes went hollow with old ghosts. "Want me to check?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, I'll go." The wind slapped against his face as he stepped outside. His footsteps squished against the soaked earth. The shed hadn't changed. Roof sagged, wood decayed. Every step closer, something deep inside him stirred. His hand reached the handle. It turned. The door creaked. Nathaniel froze. Hymns, the musty scent, the silence, the human presence. And then he saw them. A woman collapsed, 2 children by her side. One asleep, the other, watching him, eyes wide, silent, unmoving, not afraid, not hopeful, just waiting. Nathaniel stepped inside slowly, carefully. He had once laid on this same straw, cold, alone, hoping someone would open the door. No one ever did. But tonight, he was that someone. He knelt, took off his coat, laid it over the woman and her children. His hands trembled, not from cold, but from memory. Claire breathed, faint and shallow. Ava stirred. Eli stared. Nathaniel placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. Eli didn't flinch. There in the silence between 2 souls, one who had never been chosen and one who didn't know how to hope. Something passed, a fragile bond. "I'm here now," Nathaniel said. "You're safe." Eli didn't smile, but he nodded, and that was enough. Nathaniel lifted Claire onto his back, carried Ava in his arms. "Can you walk?" he asked Eli. The boy nodded and grabbed his mother's coat hem, just like he had all night. Maggie waited with the SUV door open. She didn't ask questions. She handed him a blanket, a towel, a packet of ginger tea. Kindness without commentary. Sometimes silence is the most loving response of all. As the car pulled away, its headlights cast long shadows over the grass. The shed door stayed ajar. A single piece of straw lifted into the wind and drifted out, proof that they had been there. Eli looked back one last time. The wind still howled, but it wasn't scary anymore. And Nathaniel looked back too. Not at the shed, but at the boy he once was. And the boy he had just saved. There are doors people spend their whole lives wishing someone would open. And sometimes, when they survive long enough, they become the ones who open it for someone else. Then, they come back, and they open it for someone else. Claire woke to the hazy light of an early winter morning. A wooden ceiling loomed overhead, old but clean. There were no sirens, no shouting, just the sound of wind brushing against the walls and the faint scent of magnolia carried on the warmth of a nearby fireplace. She shifted. The mattress beneath her was soft. Her clothes were dry, and though her body ached all over, the bone-deep cold from the storm had lifted, replaced by something quiet, something gentle. A thick blanket was draped over her shoulders. And then it hit her. The rain, the shed, Ava crying, Eli whispering. Claire clenched her fists and sat up with a sharp gasp. "Where are my children?" she demanded. The door opened. A man stepped inside, tall, steady, dressed in a plain cotton shirt. His voice was deep, calm. "Next room over. Both of them are still sleeping. They're safe." Claire paused, hands gripping the blanket. Her breath slowed, but her eyes stayed fixed on the man, watchful, uncertain. "Where are we?" she asked. "Grayson Farm," he replied. After I brought you all in from the shed last night, the town doctor said it was okay for you to recover here. The kids weren't running fevers. You, on the other hand, were completely drained. You've been sleeping since 2 a.m. She looked around. The room was small, but warm. A reading lamp rested on the nightstand. A folded towel sat neatly on a chair. Simple things, but human, safe. She turned back to him. You were the one who found us? He nodded. I'm Nathaniel Grayson. I own the farm. Claire gave a small nod. Part thank you, part not knowing what else to say. Nathaniel didn't press her. He simply watched with a patience that comes from knowing what it's like to rebuild from broken. No force, no pressure, just presence. It took her a long moment. Then she whispered, I didn't think we were going to make it through that night. Nathaniel sat at the edge of the bed, keeping a respectful distance. You got your children out of the storm. That's all I need to call you a mother in every real sense of the word. Claire lowered her head. The tears came fast, unexpected, and unhidden. Not from fear, but because for the first time in so long she could speak without needing to defend herself. Her voice trembled. They threw me out in the middle of the night. Just me, a canvas bag, and 2 sleeping babies in my arms. Nathaniel didn't ask who they were. He didn't ask why. Their names are Eli and Ava, she added softly, almost like she needed to say it aloud to believe they were still hers. They're twins, just turned 3. Eli's the older one. Quiet, sensitive, lives more in his head than in words. They're good kids, they really are, and I've always felt guilty for not giving them the kind of childhood they deserve. Nathaniel listened, his eyes shifting not with curiosity, but with care, as if he were holding on to every name, every detail she shared. Last night, when I passed out, I heard him whisper, Mommy, please don't leave me. Claire tightened her hands. I don't know what brought you back to that shed, Nathaniel, but if it was anything, maybe it was that voice. Nathaniel's reply was soft but solid. It was real. That voice pulled me out of memories I thought I'd buried for good. Claire looked at him stunned. He met her gaze. I was left in that shed when I was 6. Same cold, same silence. No one came. Her eyes widened. And now you came back, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Not to relive it, he replied. To make sure if someone else ever ended up there, they wouldn't go through it alone. Ah. In the next room, Eli quietly slipped from under the blanket. Just 3 years old, with soft curls and wide, dark eyes, he didn't call out. He pressed his face to the doorframe, watching his mother. Awake, safe. Claire looked up and caught sight of him. Her smile bloomed instantly. Eli, she called gently. Come here, baby. He hesitated, then took small, cautious steps toward her. He didn't avoid Nathaniel, but he kept just enough distance, the careful calculation of a child learning how to measure trust in silence. Mommy's okay now, Claire whispered as she pulled him into her arms. A soft rustle from the other room. Ava sat up, clutching her frayed corner of blanket. She rubbed her eyes, blinking. Where's Mommy? She mumbled sleepily. Claire smiled. Right here, Ava. Mommy's right here. Little feet padded quickly across the floor. Ava flung herself into her mother's embrace, holding on like she'd never let go. Nathaniel stood and took a step back. He knew this moment didn't need words. The door opened once more. An older woman entered carrying a tray with tea and neatly folded towels. Her face was kind, her eyes sharp, the kind of woman who'd been caring for people long before they realized they needed it. Good morning, Miss Matthews, she said warmly. I'm Maggie Jean, housekeeper here. Chamomile tea with ginger, helps the lungs, warms the body. Claire nodded gently. Thank you, Maggie. Just Maggie's fine. The little ones are sweet. Ava woke up at dawn and told me this place has no ghosts. I took it as a compliment. Claire laughed. For the first time in days of cold, rain, and fear. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But here, right now, her children were safe. And they were not alone. And in a world where sometimes all it takes is one person staying, just one, to change everything, Claire knew a new chapter had begun. And if you're still reading this far, maybe a piece of this moment has reached a part of you too. Have you ever woken up in a strange room, unsure of what comes next, or found yourself silently wishing someone, just one person, would sit beside you, say nothing, and just not leave? If you have, I'd love to hear your story. Share it with me. 3 days after the storm, the Grayson farm began to fill with life again. Ava played on the living room floor, scribbling on a piece of cardboard. Maggie set a plate of cookies in front of her, then returned to wiping down the kitchen table. Eli didn't speak, but sat nearby, his eyes never leaving his mother. Claire was folding laundry with Maggie. Her hands were steadier now. Her face was still pale, but her eyes had cleared, no longer dull like they were that first morning. Maggie glanced at the children and spoke softly. Little Ava's easy to love. And Eli, quiet kid, but look close. He's a lot like the boss when he was young. Didn't say much, but had a mind full of stories. Claire let out a soft laugh. I think Eli carries the weight of someone who survived more than he should have. Maggie paused. That's exactly how Nathaniel survived too. When he first came here, he didn't speak for 3 months, just sat by the window, watching. But his eyes, always watching, always deep. Claire nodded and went quiet for a few seconds, then said carefully, I don't know where we're going next. I just know I can't keep dragging my kids from place to place. If it's possible, I'd like to stay a little longer. I'll help in the kitchen, do laundry, anything. I don't expect it for free. Maggie smiled as she continued folding towels. You'll have to talk to Mr. Nathaniel, but I'll tell you one thing. This house hasn't felt this peaceful in years, not since you and the kids arrived that night. After the children had gone to bed, Claire stepped softly into the living room. The fireplace still glowed. Nathaniel sat nearby, holding a leather-bound journal. A mug of tea steamed beside him. You're still up? Claire asked. He didn't turn. I am. Something on your mind? She sat across from him, back straight. The firelight cast soft shadows on her tired face. I never said thank you, she began. I want to thank you for everything, not just for letting us stay, but for not questioning us, even when we showed up out of nowhere. Nathaniel nodded, still not looking directly at her. I used to hate being questioned, so I don't ask questions now. We don't have anywhere else to go, Claire continued. If it's okay, I'd like to stay for a while. I'll help however I can. I'm not skilled at anything special, but I won't let anyone feed my children for free. Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment, not judging, just still. This house used to be cold, he said, not because of winter, but because it was missing people who truly lived. He set the journal aside. You and the kids can stay as long as you need. Claire smiled softly, shyly, but sincerely. One evening after dinner, Nathaniel sat on the floor with Ava and Eli. Claire watched quietly, overwhelmed by the sight of her children smiling. Not just smiling, but happy in a way she hadn't seen in years. Even Maggie noticed. She leaned toward Claire and said gently, It's been a long, long time since this house, or that man, felt this warm. Claire looked at them, Nathaniel laughing as Ava held up a crayon like a trophy. And for the first time, she let herself think, if only their real father had ever treated them this way. Maggie noticed the look in her eyes. She placed a hand over Claire's. Go to them. Your heart needs healing, Claire. You deserve every good thing this world still has to offer. Claire looked at her, eyes glassy. Her heart swelled with gratitude and grief. After tidying the kitchen, Maggie left quietly, leaving the space for just the four of them. Claire approached the living room, wiping away a tear that had escaped, one filled with both pain and peace. She sat down beside the children, watched them play, then turned to Nathaniel. Not out of weakness, not out of brokenness, but with a voice steady, like peeling back layers of a wound too long buried. She told him about Mark, the man who had been charming while courting her and hollow after marrying her. About her mother-in-law, who had always treated her like an ungrateful burden. About the nights she slept in the hallway, clutching her babies while Mark passed out drunk. And finally, about the night they threw her out, when all she had time to grab was a bag, a bottle of milk, and Ava's tattered blanket. Nathaniel said nothing, just listened. Nah. And in Claire's posture, in the way she gripped her hands while recounting how she had to choose between her life and her children's safety, Nathaniel saw something familiar. The way her fingers curled looked just like that little boy he once was, watching through the slats of the old shed wall, seeing a girl with tangled hair hold tightly to her mother's dress. He didn't know for sure, but his heart did. Something had shifted. The next morning, light rain tapped against the windows. Nathaniel called his attorney. I need everything you can find on Mark Wallace and Darlene Wallace. Dig deep, especially anything they've buried. A few days later, a thick folder arrived. Brown cover, smelling of old paper and early winter air. Nathaniel didn't open it right away. He left it on the old wooden table in the quiet room, where only the ticking of the clock could be heard. He poured himself a cup of coffee, then began flipping through the pages. Page 1. Mark Wallace, accused of domestic violence in 2016. Case closed quickly. Signs of private settlement, and no criminal charges. Page 2. Denial of maternity benefits. Claire Matthews listed. Signature didn't match hospital records. Signed by Darlene Wallace. Page 3. Medical report. Claire admitted for falling downstairs. Fractured rib. Shoulder contusion. No investigation. No follow-up. Nathaniel set the page down. He sat in silence. The house was quiet. Far off, he heard Ava laughing. He turned. Claire was in the kitchen, making tea. The soft morning light touched her hair. Ava sat perched on the kitchen counter, laughing as a cookie slipped from her fingers and crumbled onto the floor. He watched them for a long moment, the sound pulling him back to a shed long ago. Him, 6 years old, peeking through the cracks and catching a glimpse of a girl smiling just like Ava did now. Back then, he couldn't step outside, trapped in silence and fear, but this time, he vowed not to leave anyone behind that door. Claire walked into the room and saw the open folder resting on the table. Nathaniel said nothing. He simply slid it toward her. She didn't reach for it immediately, just read the first line. That was enough. She understood someone had pulled the past out of the dark, shining a light on wounds left raw for years. Quietly, she turned each page, each sentence like a stitch, not painful, but pulling closed a wound left open for 3 long years. Her hand trembled slightly, but her eyes remained steady and clear. Finally, she looked up, her voice firm and steady. I'm not doing this for revenge, she said. I'm doing it because I thought I was the only one who ever went through it. Her gaze drifted toward the kitchen where Ava was still laughing. I can't let the next time be another mother who doesn't survive. Nathaniel looked at her longer than usual before nodding. I'll take care of my part. You just keep living. Raise your kids. That's the hard part. Claire smiled, not politely, not out of habit, but because for the first time in years, she knew someone was standing behind her. Some people only want back what they once threw away, not out of love, but because they can't stand losing control. Mark was one of those people. For the past 3 weeks, Mark had lived in what he proudly called freedom. No crying kids, no nagging, no Claire Matthews. But that illusion cracked the moment his mother, Darlene, handed him a brief note from someone at her church. A note about Claire seen near the Grayson Medical Clinic, close to Nathaniel Grayson's farm. Mark froze. Grayson? Who? Nathaniel Grayson, Darlene replied. The guy on the cover of that magazine. Regenerative Farming Now. Some millionaire farmer. Mark said nothing. But that night, he quietly called a private investigator, a friend's recommendation, and asked, "Find my ex-wife, Claire Matthews, likely in Grayson County with twin kids. What exactly do you want to know?" The man responded, "The man she's living with." 3 days later, the report arrived. Grainy photos of Claire holding Ava in the yard, Eli near the garden, seated beside a tall man sharpening a plow under the porch. The image tightened Mark's throat, and the attached background file on Nathaniel Grayson left him squinting at the dossier, cigarette burning between his fingers. Then he smirked. She sure knows how to latch on to someone. Without hesitation, Mark got in his SUV and drove straight to Grayson. At the Grayson farm, the air was still and cold early winter, the wind threading through pine branches that swayed against a silver sky. Ava sat on the porch, lining up small acorns in neat rows, while Eli sat beside her, carving a wooden spoon for Maggie, his hands careful and focused. Claire watched from the kitchen window, drying the last dish. No makeup, no tension in her shoulders. For the first time in years, she allowed herself a slow morning. Then the sound of tires, quiet but enough to shatter the stillness. Eli looked up first, hand freezing mid-cut. Ava followed his gaze, then turned toward their mother. Claire didn't move, only for half a second, before setting the glass down and wiping her hands on her apron. The gate was unlocked. A black SUV rolled in, its tires leaving thick tracks in the wet red clay. Mark stepped out, white dress shirt buttoned to the collar, hair slicked back. One hand held a box of cookies, the other a child's gift box. His eyes scanned the yard as if sizing up a property he once owned. "Claire," he said, voice low, warm, but thick with smoke that clung to everything it touched. Claire stepped outside. Her legs stiffened for a split second, then softened enough to carry her forward. The kids followed instinctively, Eli pulling Ava behind him. "You look well," Mark said, half smiling. "Not quite the last image I had of you." Claire stood firm in front of the doorway, unmoving. "Why are you here? To see my kids? Since when did you remember they're yours?" "I get that you're mad, but that doesn't mean you can keep them from me. I'm their father. The law still says that counts." From inside the house came a quiet creak as Nathaniel stepped outside. He stood at Claire's right side, calm, steady, and placed one hand gently on her shoulder. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to still the wind. "I'm Nathaniel Grayson. I own this land. If you have business, talk through a lawyer." Mark rolled his eyes and smirked. "So this is what we're doing now? Found yourself a sugar daddy, huh, Claire?" She didn't respond. Not because she was afraid, but because he no longer deserved a single word. "You threw me and our children out in the middle of a storm, called me a whore, smashed your daughter's milk bottle on the floor, and now you show up with cookies and think that makes you a father? I said I was sorry, and you can't keep them from me forever." From inside the house came the sound of Ava crying. Eli appeared at the door, small hand gripping the wooden frame, his voice quiet but every syllable cutting through the air like a blade. "Don't let him inside, Mommy." Mark turned toward him, forcing a smile. "Eli, it's Dad. I just came to visit." Eli said nothing. He only stepped back, pulling Ava closer. Claire stepped forward, voice cold and steady. "You don't get to come in, and you don't get to call them yours. You didn't raise them. You didn't protect them. You never even asked if they were still alive. So what are you to them, really?" Mark's face flushed red. "I'll sue you. I'll fight for custody." Nathaniel stepped forward, blocking the door. Great, then we'll talk in court. But don't show up here again unless you're holding a subpoena. If you take one more step on this land, I'll remove you myself. Nathaniel's voice wasn't angry. It didn't need to be. There was power in a man who didn't have to raise his tone, who only had to stand his ground. Mark stared at him, then turned back to Claire. You think he'll let you stay here forever? Claire looked him in the eye. No fear, only truth. Longer than you ever did. Mark swallowed hard, eyes bloodshot, staring at the house one last time. Not with concern, but like a sore loser refusing to admit defeat. Then he turned, climbed into the SUV, and drove off, leaving behind the smell of burning rubber and the bitter cold of an unwanted presence. Claire collapsed onto the porch steps, sweat beading her brow, heart pounding as if she'd outrun a flood. That night, after the kids had fallen asleep, Nathaniel stepped outside and found Eli sitting alone, staring into the dark. After a while, Eli whispered, "Uncle Nathaniel, Mommy cries in her room sometimes. She thinks we're asleep. I don't want her to cry anymore. Please don't let her be scared again." Nathaniel sat down beside him, silent for a moment before pulling the boy into his arms. Ava, half asleep and clutching her pillow, wandered out too, and he wrapped them both close. "I promise no one will hurt your mom again. Not ever." Claire stood frozen at the door, hands trembling but rooted in place. She didn't step forward or speak, but the tears came. Not from weakness, but because for the first time in her life, she saw what it looked like when someone else held her children safe in a moment she couldn't. The next morning, the sky turned a hard gray and the wind picked up, dark clouds gathering low along the edge of the hills. No one said it aloud, but everyone felt it. A storm was coming. On the table lay the file on Mark and Darlene, open and waiting. Nathaniel flipped another page. The evidence grew clearer with each turn. Claire stood behind him, hand gripping the back of the chair, eyes locked. "It's time," she said. Nathaniel nodded. "Time to stop leaving everything behind a closed door." At dawn, the Grayson farm was quieter than usual, but not peaceful. Everyone was up early, the air thick with unspoken tension. No one spoke much, but they all knew today wasn't ordinary. Maggie prepared breakfast for the children, cornbread and boiled eggs. Ava ate in small bites. Eli spun the wooden spoon in his hands, head down but eyes fixed on the door. Maggie placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to worry, sweetheart. Your mom and Uncle Nathaniel know what they're doing. They'll do what's right." Eli looked up, voice small but steady. "I want to go." Claire, standing just behind the doorway, heard every word. She walked over and knelt beside him. "There will be a lot of people. It might get loud. Some might say hurtful things." Eli met her eyes and said something that stilled the room. "I don't need to speak, but if I sit beside you, they'll know you're not alone." No one spoke. Maggie stood, grabbing scarves for the children, her voice soft like a blessing. "Then today, we all go. No one gets left behind." Shut. The Jefferson County Courthouse was modest. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, benches arranged in 2 quiet rows, still and solemn like a chapel. Fluorescent lights cast a pale glow across the floor. Claire entered first, white button-down blouse, sleeves rolled, hair tied low, no makeup, no jewelry, just a small notebook filled with every unseen wound. Eli and Ava sat in the second row with Maggie. Nathaniel walked beside Claire, expression unreadable but eyes forward, ready for a battle without weapons. Mark sat across the aisle, black suit, red tie, clean-shaven, dressed like a polished businessman, but his eyes betrayed bitterness and possessiveness. Darlene sat beside her son, black dress, snakeskin purse clutched in her lap, looking at Claire like a returned package. No surprise, no sympathy, just long-standing contempt. Nah. The judge entered. Judge Albright, a woman in her early 60s with silver hair, spine straight as steel after 30 years on the bench. People called her the last door in family justice. She gave a single nod. No gavel needed. Preliminary custody hearing. Matthews versus Wallace. We'll begin. Claire's attorney opened the file. Your Honor, we present the following. A medical report from Montana General confirming injuries to Claire Matthews, shoulder and ribs, dated 2019. A denied medical assistance form containing a forged signature, proven to be from Darlene Wallace. Audio testimony from neighbors on July 14th, documenting the night Mark Wallace forced his wife and children out of the home with clear evidence of emotional trauma inflicted on the minors. He pressed play. The courtroom stiffened as voices echoed. Get the hell out of my house. I'm done raising you and those kids. I know they're not even mine. Ava sobbing, Eli screaming, Mommy, don't go, don't leave us. Darlene lowered her eyes. Mark shifted in his seat but said nothing. Claire sat still, eyes fixed on the table. Mark's lawyer spoke next. Your Honor, my client, Mr. Wallace, acknowledges past emotional outbursts, but firmly denies any physical harm. Miss Matthews left of her own accord. There was no coercion. Claire was called to the stand. She walked up with no notes, her voice low but clear. I didn't leave out of anger. I left because I couldn't let my children learn silence as a response to violence. I used to bow my head, but my children don't deserve to grow up thinking that's normal. Mark interrupted. I lost my job. I was under stress. I admit I wasn't perfect, but that doesn't make me a bad person. I just want to see my kids. Judge Albright turned to him, flipping a page. You were accused of assaulting a former girlfriend in 2016. Case dropped after a private settlement. Correct? That was years ago, Mark replied. Old doesn't mean erased. She lifted her gaze slowly across the room. I didn't sign anything. She forged it. Claire's lawyer handed over a document, a handwriting analysis from the state legal office. The final line was bolded. Signature is not a match. Forgery confirmed. Darlene Wallace's fingerprints found on the document. Judge Albright closed the file, her hand resting gently on the bench. A silence fell. A silence so heavy it felt like time itself was holding its breath. Eli reached for his mother's hand. Ava leaned over and whispered, Does the judge know Mommy's a good person? Eli replied, eyes never leaving the bench. She knows, because today Mommy didn't cry. The judge spoke. This court finds that Mark Wallace inflicted serious physical and psychological harm on his wife and children. All custodial rights, visitation privileges, and parental claims are hereby suspended indefinitely. Darlene Wallace's actions qualify for criminal investigation on grounds of document forgery and benefits fraud. Full and permanent custody is awarded to Claire Matthews. Psychological support services are recommended for the children, Ava and Eli. The courtroom doors creaked open as a gust of cold air swept in. Mark lowered his head, jaw clenched. Darlene turned away, shoulders rigid. No one looked at them again. Claire sat down and took her children's hands. She didn't cry, but her eyes glowed like someone who had finally set down a weight they'd carried their whole life. Nathaniel stood behind her, hand resting gently on her shoulder. Maggie leaned down to Ava and whispered, Your mommy did it. Eli looked at his mother, then toward the doors where the light poured in from the hallway. Now Mommy doesn't have to run anymore, he said. We're standing now. On the drive back from court, the car was silent but not heavy. Still, but no longer suffocating. Claire sat in the back seat, Ava curled asleep in her lap. Eli stared out the window, occasionally drawing foggy circles on the glass with his fingertip. A crooked, smiley face, uneven, just like the ones he used to draw on dark nights in the shed when his mother lay unconscious and he dared not fall asleep. This time he added arms, 2 of them, each arm reaching outward, connecting to 4 other figures. Eli whispered softly, I drew our family. Claire placed her hand gently on his hair. She didn't answer. She only smiled, her first smile in a long time, not held back by tears. Absolutely. Here's your beautifully rewritten script in polished paragraph style, preserving every detail, tone, and length, while enhancing flow, imagery, and emotional depth. The farm came into view through the thinning pines just before 1 in the afternoon. Montana's air was dry and cold, the sunlight brushing the silver-gray rooftops like dusted snow. Maggie was the first to step out of the car, clutching Ava's wool scarf in her arms. She paused, her eyes sweeping the familiar land as if to take in its scent. "We're home," she said softly, voice carrying a quiet certainty. "Now it really begins." Claire nodded, saying nothing, but her eyes shimmered. In that moment, someone might have thought she was about to cry, but she wasn't. She was simply breathing fully, freely, with lungs finally her own. Dinner was soft cornbread and warm chicken soup. Claire ate quietly, often glancing at her children. Ava swung her feet beneath the table, giggling as Maggie told a story about how Uncle Nathaniel used to skip school to carve wood. Eli didn't laugh. He sat at the end of the table gripping a colored pencil, drawing circles on a napkin. Uneven smiley faces, none quite the same. Claire walked over, her hand gently touching the back of his neck, right where a faint, drop-shaped birthmark lay hidden beneath his hair. "You're drawing smiley faces again," she said softly. "Yeah," Eli replied quietly. "I want to make a lot so you won't be sad anymore." Nathaniel stood at the sink, hearing every word. He turned away, pretending to grab another bowl, hiding the way his knuckles had gone white from gripping the counter too tight. The next afternoon, sunlight spilled over the mountains like honey, golden, slow, and warm. No one said a word, but all four of them headed to the old shed. Maggie carried a small basket, Claire brought a wooden broom, and the children each held something important. Ava with her box of crayons, and Eli clutching a folded piece of paper close to his chest. The shed was still a shed, but the tin roof had been replaced and rotten wood repaired. Even so, the air inside held something unnamed. Not mold, not dust, but memory. Claire stepped forward first, fingers brushing the doorframe like knocking gently on an old ghost. She inhaled deeply. The cold air no longer smelled musty, but still carried the chill, the kind that remembered the night she nearly didn't wake up. Nathaniel stood beside her, holding a polished wooden plaque, with a smooth surface and words hand-carved sharp and deliberate. Asterisk, no one gets left behind. He propped the plaque gently against the wall, the soft but ringing sound it made as it touched the floor like a vow. Claire started sweeping broken beams, each swipe of the broom brushing not just wood, but her own past. Maggie opened old boxes, folding torn fabric and sorting through rusted tin containers from Nathaniel's boyhood. Ava sat cross-legged near the doorway, drawing a sun with thick yellow lines right beneath the threshold, humming a tune no one could quite place. Eli sat near the far wall, unfolding his drawing. A smiley face still imperfect, but beneath it a red heart, color bleeding outside the lines. He taped it to the wooden wall. No one told him to, no one asked, but everyone stopped to look. Nathaniel walked over to Claire and glanced around the room before speaking softly, his voice barely above the rustle of wind outside. "There's something I've wanted to tell you for a long time." Claire looked up. She was still kneeling, hands dusty from broken wood. Her eyes met his, and in that moment, they stood in the very room where both had once been lost, just in different years. Nathaniel pointed to a corner where late sun lit a narrow slit between the boards. "When I was 6, I stayed here before anyone took me in. I had no name, no one called for me, no one waited. I spent the first 3 nights sleeping in that corner, just staring through that crack in the wall. One afternoon," he continued, "I saw a woman walk past the yard holding hands with the little girl. The girl wore a flower dress, her hair messy, no shoes, but her eyes, they were so bright." Claire froze. She let go of the broom, took a step back. "I was here. My mom used to work odd jobs in this area. I wandered out back once. She scolded me for playing in the dirt." Nathaniel nodded slowly. I remember your eyes, the way you walked, half skipping, like the world didn't have cracks in it yet. He paused as the sunlight touched the old boards behind them. When I saw you and your mother, I remember thinking if someone could just hold my hand like that, maybe the night wouldn't feel so cold. Claire turned her face away, but her chest betrayed her with a quiet tremor. So we passed each other once, she said softly. So close, and didn't meet again until you collapsed in the exact place I once laid, and your son sat in the exact spot I once feared. Nathaniel stepped forward but didn't reach for her. He only said, "This time I'm not the boy behind the wall." Claire turned back, not smiling, but her eyes softened as if a fog had finally lifted from her chest. "And I'm not the girl who keeps getting lost." The wind slipped through the open door. Ava tugged on Claire's hand. "Mommy, look, I drew our house. See the sun?" Eli called softly from the back. "Uncle Nathaniel, can you hang my drawing high? I want people to see it when they come in." Nathaniel nodded, hanging Eli's picture next to the plaque. Two images side by side, a lopsided smile and a red, messy heart next to a promise carved in wood. Asterisk, no one gets left behind. That night, after Ava had fallen asleep in Maggie's arms, Eli sat by the window with his crayons. This time, he didn't draw a face. Instead, he drew a small house with smoke curling from the chimney. 4 figures stood in front of the door, one tall with long hair, 2 little ones underneath, and in clumsy but determined letters, he wrote, "Asterda, Ska our home. No one left behind." Claire looked at the drawing but didn't speak, only stared. Then she turned to Nathaniel and whispered, "Tomorrow, I want to paint the shed. I want it to stop being a place anyone fears." Nathaniel nodded, his voice soft but certain, like a vow sealed in daylight. "I'll bring the paint, and I'll keep the door open." There are some houses," he said, "that don't need to be rebuilt. They just need enough light and warmth for people to find their way back." And that day, in a shed that once held broken stories, 4 people stood with hands, with paint, with old scars, and a new heart. 1 week after the hearing, Montana changed seasons overnight. No more wind slipped through unsealed doors. No more frost blanketed the porch steps at dawn. Instead, soft early winter sunlight slanted over dried cornfields and the last golden maple leaves that refused to fall. Claire opened the kitchen window, letting light pour in as the scent of cinnamon from Maggie's baking floated through the breeze. On the porch, Ava ran in circles wearing a brand new red scarf. Eli sat beside Nathaniel, sharpening pencils while the man carved a wooden frame for one of his drawings. "He doesn't feel like a stranger anymore," Maggie said quietly, stirring soup on the stove. "This air, I used to think this house would never feel like this again. Warm, not because of the fireplace, but because of the laughter." Claire didn't respond, but her eyes lingered on the scene. 2 children huddled close around Nathaniel, laughing at a crooked nail in the wood, and something inside her shifted. Not loud, but real. The next morning, Nathaniel surprised everyone with a single line. "Let's go into town today. Get a few things for the kids and for their new room." Ava shrieked first. "I want a dress with flower pockets for my rocks." Eli didn't speak, but nodded hard. Claire looked at Nathaniel. He didn't push, didn't ask for permission. He simply said, "If we're living like a family, then we should do family things." It had been a long time since Claire walked through town without feeling like she had to run. They passed the grocery store, stopped by a dusty old bookshop. Ava chose a comic with cats. Eli picked crayons, orange for the first time, not just black and gray, at the children's clothing store. Claire hesitated. "I don't even know what we need." Nathaniel smiled. "Then pick what you've never let yourself buy before." By afternoon, they returned with a car full of things. New blankets, school notebooks, dinosaur dishes, wall paint, night lights, and 2 pairs of waterproof boots for the coming snow. Ava picked light pink wallpaper with bees. Eli chose navy blue with a world map. Claire sat on the floor, paint on her hands, hair a mess, but eyes glowing. It's been so long since I've seen them be the age they're supposed to be. That night, they ate Texas-style barbecue under the stars. Maggie made apple pie. Ava ate with one hand, telling a story about a bumblebee who played soccer. Eli quietly sketched a drawing of Nathaniel titled Asterisk, the Man Who Keeps the Wind Out. Claire laughed. Not because it was funny, but because she couldn't hold it back anymore. She looked at Nathaniel, a man who didn't speak much, who just cut Ava's food, refilled Eli's water, cleared the plates when everyone was full. No promises, no pressure, just presence. That night, as Claire tucked the kids into bed, Eli turned to her and asked, "Can Uncle Nathaniel be Dad? Not like the old one, just a dad who stays." Claire squeezed his hand but didn't answer. Later, when she walked downstairs and found Nathaniel fixing the door hinge, the warm light catching the quiet lines on his face, his weathered hands, his calm eyes looking back at her, not questioning, not demanding, just waiting, she knew the answer didn't need to be spoken. Sometimes morning light doesn't just pour through windows. It slips into the quietest corners of the heart. Claire realized that one morning in early June. The sunlight wasn't just on the porch. It filled the kitchen, where Maggie poured tea. Ava hummed a song while kicking her feet, and Eli stood on tiptoes drawing on the family chalkboard. This time, no crooked smiley faces. He drew a small house with smoke rising from the chimney, 4 figures standing side by side, and beneath it in shaky letters, Asterisk, our home. The house came alive bit by bit. Every footstep, every spoon tapping against a breakfast bowl made it feel warmer, more real. Gone were the nights of silent breathing and trying to sleep through fear. Now the dark was filled with whispers, laughter, Ava asking, "Can we paint again tomorrow, Mom?" Eli writing slowly in the cloth-bound journal Claire had sewn for him. Claire didn't say much, but she knew. This shift hadn't come just from moving into the main house. It came from the fact that every heart inside that house had started to beat in sync. Even Maggie felt it. She often stood on the porch, gazing at the golden fields, muttering with a smile. This house used to have only wind in its walls. Now it's got little feet running, teaspoons stirring, and this old heart of mine waking up again. Nathaniel never said much either, but he was there more, fixing the porch roof, building a little desk for Claire's art supplies, lowering a bookshelf so Ava could reach, and showing Eli how to carve his name into a pencil box. He wasn't trying to be a father. He was just there as naturally as sunrise. One late afternoon, sunlight filtered sideways through the mountains. Claire took the children back to the old shed, not to clean it or repaint. That was done this time. Eli wanted to hang a new picture. The one Claire had once said was her favorite. A house with warm yellow light pouring from its windows. Inside the shed, the afternoon glow touched every surface. No mold, no cold. What once was a place of collapse was now a quiet, warm room with a bookshelf, a few old toys, and a wooden sign still hanging high. Asterisk, no one gets left behind. On the twins' 4th birthday, the sky was startlingly clear. The air was soft sunlight, like golden honey, and the wind carried tiny flags strung along the fence like fluttering whispers. The whole town came. Some brought cake, some brought toys, some came just to see her. Claire, the woman who'd once been cast out into the night, now standing in a green dress, hair tied back, smile steady and whole. Maggie baked a 3-tiered cake. Nathaniel set up a long wooden table in the yard. On it, a small wooden sign that read, Asterisk, today we were born again. Me. Ava ran everywhere, hugging every gift giver, racing back to show Eli each new treasure. Eli, as always, was quieter. He sat next to Nathaniel, eyes watchful when Nathaniel leaned in and whispered, "You doing okay?" Eli looked up, thought for a second, and softly replied, "Dad." Nathaniel froze, not from surprise, but because in that moment the world itself paused. No one else noticed. People were clapping for the candles, but for him, that second melted away every old winter left in his chest. Ava heard it. She ran over, hugged his leg, shouting, "Daddy, we're four now." Nathaniel looked up and saw Claire watching. Her eyes were no longer guarded, no longer uncertain, just clear and sure. She nodded once, the kind of nod that comes after years of wondering, seeing, and finally believing. This man is home. He scooped both children up, spinning them into the golden air. Ava laughed uncontrollably. Eli clung to his neck, still whispering, "Dad." Claire stood at the porch, eyes glistening, not from pain, but from joy, from gratitude, from a long-awaited faith finally blooming after far too many dry seasons. When the party quieted down, Eli tugged Claire's hand toward the shed. He opened the door, the same door that once creaked open into a storm. Now it opened smooth, no wind, no fear. Inside, the wooden sign still hung. The words, carved deep, asterisk, "No one gets left behind." Eli stood at the threshold, looked up at his mum, and whispered, "This is where the magic started." The sun dipped low. The whole family sat together on the porch steps. Behind them, the warm wooden house glowed. The golden field blushed into soft red. Nathaniel sat in the center. Claire leaned into his shoulder. Ava curled into her mother's lap. Eli sat close, drawing one more smiley face, this time not crooked, not shaky. Still, no one said a word, but they all knew there were no more doors to lock.